Hey everyone, this is Asbed Bedrossian,
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
and we're talking with Gev Iskajyan on the latest conditions and events during the Artsakh Blockade. Gev is with the ANC in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. He lives in Stepanakert. Today is April 12th, 2023. This is the 122nd day of the Artsakh Blockade. Hey Gev, how are you doing on this 4-month anniversary of the blockade from December 12th to April 12th?
All things considered, thank God we're doing okay. Good to be on with you guys.
Hey, Gev. I can't believe it's been 4 months now, and there is no shortage of important news to cover. Let's begin with what has been going on in Armenia over the past few weeks, which is related to what's going on in Artsakh. Around the last few days of March, the story begins then. There were reports that Azerbaijani forces moved, according to Armenian government sources, preemptively moved to take positions near the village of Tegh. And in some cases, the Armenian National Security Service claims that they moved several hundred meters inside the borders of Armenia. What's interesting about that is that yesterday there was a serious fighting which resulted in the loss of 4 Armenian soldiers, 6 wounded. And the videos released showed that the Armenian forces were about 150 meters or 200 meters away from the Azerbaijani forces, who had been basically building communications and establishing themselves in their newfound positions very quickly around the day. And it appears that Armenian forces decided just yesterday to start making their own fortifications, and this resulted in a battle that unfortunately led to loss of life. This is basically around Tegh village. For those who are interested, you can listen to my interview with Naira Melikian, mother of fallen soldier Haik Melikian, about this issue. And she was actually earlier last week, and she had a confrontation with the Armenian border guards. So what I wanted to ask you is, what is the feeling in Artsakh? How are people perceiving this, yet another violent act by Azerbaijan? What are the goals, and how are the people receiving this news in Artsakh?
Yeah, I think, there's two sides to this. One is the natural connection that people make anytime there's Azerbaijani escalation, especially in places like Sunik, or especially, now this close to Artsakh. That always comes hand in hand. If there's a threat in Armenia, the preparedness or the alert level here has to and does go up. The secondary issue to this is currently the Azeris are blocking the border through Berdzor right now, through that corridor. Now we're running chants as they, get closer to areas like Kappan, get closer to areas like Tegh, that even if that road was open, they would be able to cut Artsakh off from inside Armenia too. So these are all pressing concerns.
Yeah, the new positions that Azerbaijanis have established are hundreds of meters away from the new road that is supposed to link
Yes.
Armenia to Artsakh. So they are within fire control. And Naira Melikian, of course, this is disputed, but Naira Melikian says that Azerbaijanis have some kind of a post already on that section of the road, or are essentially vying to establish a post there. So the situation looks very precarious. I know that the Berdzor corridor is now almost not being utilized and only for emergency purposes, since Azerbaijan on March 25 moved in and took more strategic heights to sort of close off the alternative route. There were claims that Armenians were using. So authorities in Artsakh basically established more strict rules about who can
Yeah.
come to Armenia. What is the situation right now in terms of communication, road communication with
Yeah.
Armenia? Who can go, who can't, and so forth?
So I think there's two things. One is the closing of that road that you mentioned in late March, that the Azeris have, again, deployed a certain amount of troops there. That has been a hindrance. On top of that, you also have the second incident where a Russian convoy full of residents of Artsakh coming back into Armenia, they were denied entry
And searched.
and searched through the Berdzor corridors. So since then, not only has it naturally been more difficult to get people in and out, but because of the precautions that even Artsakh is taking, the government here is taking, there's much more limited access for people. And unfortunately, that includes people that need to get reunited with their families, people that need to go to Armenia, mostly for medical reasons. All of that has come to a very grinding, slow pace.
Gev, Outside of working through the Russian peacekeepers, does the Artsakh government have any means of mitigating these closures or ensuring that these vital lines remain somehow accessible?
Its vast majority is coordinated with the peacekeeping contingency that's here. They have access in terms of, let's say, how many people or how often they need to try and get people across the border for emergency like uses. And it's a matter of amount, but in terms of scale and like how freely they can move, to be honest, I don't think that's under their control. That's under the purview of the Russians.
Hey, Hovik, as an aside, I wonder if you scanned the news today on these Azeri aggressions of yesterday. The news was full of Bothsidism from all parties.
Yeah.
Here we have Azeri forces who have invaded Armenian territory, fortifying their positions near Armenian villages, on Armenian farmer fields, in fact. And then they call actions by Armenian border troops for setting up their own posts provocative, and they start killing Armenians. And what do we get from the EU and the Russians? They're calling on all sides to refrain from escalation, strictly respect the 2020 trilateral agreement, blah, blah, woof, woof. To add insult to injury, the EU mission apparently didn't have observers in what has been the hottest flashpoint of the border in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, we knew this from the get-go, that just because the EU monitors are physically in Armenia does not mean that EU Bothsidism is going to get any sort of better or any more mild. Yesterday just proved that, in my opinion, it proved that EU's policy doesn't change, and it's not going to try to cause problems with Azerbaijan for whatever reason, whether it's geopolitical to cause more pressure against Russia, or whether it really needs those 2 billion barrels of gas, which is like 1 or 2% of what it's using, or like small percentage of what it's using, or what it needs. I'm going to take the liberty here, being the founder of this podcast, and just say, the biggest blame for this, obviously, I mean, we keep mentioning we want to sort of, we're Armenian, we want to protect Armenia, but who allowed the Azerbaijanis to come and establish checkpoints in Armenia unchallenged?
Absolutely.
That is the core sin. That is the original sin. And some would say, I don't want to go into whether it's deliberate or not, but you allowed Azerbaijani forces to establish their positions in Armenia up to 500 even meters inside Armenia. Then you allowed them to fortify and build entrenchments for 12 days. And then just only on the 12th day, you try to send forces and try to, now 150 meters away from their positions, we're going to build our own trenches. Anyone with common sense would say that the Azerbaijanis are going to fire on you and they're not going to let you build trenches. Regardless of, the current status quo is Azerbaijanis are in Armenia. They're not going to allow Armenians to do that, to challenge them. And in fact, there are reports that they're forcing Armenians to be 5 kilometers away from them. So that means that, if that's true, then that would mean the Armenian positions would run through the middle of Tegh village. Unfortunately, like most of the analysis I'm seeing so far is that we cannot, unless it's by force, we cannot push the Azeris back. And we've seen time and time again, we've seen it through the 44-day war, that Europeans nor the Russians are not going to fight for one hill or one, a few kilometers here and there. So the responsibility for not allowing this to happen was fully on the Armenian side. And right now we're just crying over sour grapes because we allowed it to happen. And in fact, I would say whoever decided to build those trenches 150 meters away from the Turks is responsible for the death of those 4 soldiers.
Yeah.
It's just, it's common sense.
Yeah, it's very sad that all I've seen from the Armenian side is just basically statements of the obvious by people like Hovik Manucharyan, the foreign minister, Pashinyan, etc. So, but there's not a single ounce of effort to actually push back about this.
And Hovik Manucharyan, unfortunately, we've had him several times on our show, but he's crying. He's still crying on Twitter about Armenia being a democratic country and go to your leader Nikol, and ask him why he allowed this to happen, because someone allowed the Azeris to come forward. This doesn't happen automatically. And now the Azeris have a very good chance of actually blocking the Lachin corridor, the Berdzor corridor, even before the corridor starts. And then a big legal question happens as to whether can the Russians even intervene here? Do the Russian peacekeepers have jurisdiction in this area, because technically this is the Armenian border, which the Azeris claim is theirs, but it's, based on the original definition of the Berdzor or Lachin corridor in the November 910 document. I mean, it's a big mess. I don't even know. I'm not a legal analyst, but it doesn't take a genius to guess that this is now a huge mess. And the Armenian authorities, no matter what, the Armenian authorities allow this to happen in the first place. I'm sorry.
Look, I'll just chime in quickly here and let you guys go on with it. I think it's really telling of the fact that, and there's some connection to Artsakh. When you hear people say, look, we need to expand the peacekeeping presence, we need EU peacekeepers, we need US peacekeepers, maybe, sure, that's an idea, but we've seen it play out, right? We're seeing it play out in Sunik. We're seeing it play out in Tegh. I'm not even saying have these, the EU observers that are currently there. Their job isn't to intervene. But at the very least, when you're, talking about these statements coming out about Bothsidism, I thought that the purpose was to see who's violating the ceasefire.
Absolutely.
Who's doing all these things. So is that rendered useless, or are they,
The EU mission claimed that they didn't have people at that spot. So
yeah.
I don't know where they are.
Well, part of it is they also inform Azerbaijan where they're going to be. And that's a statement they've made on their behalf, too.
Yeah.
The EU observers let them know beforehand. So,
yeah. Okay. Gev, a couple of days ago, Arayik Harutyunyan extended an invite to the Azeri government for talks in Stepanakert. Have you heard about this? Do you know more about this?
Yeah, this has a couple factors to it. One, this is an obvious response to Azerbaijan asking the Karabakh authorities, Artsakh authorities, to go to a meeting in Baku. I think this is partly a counter to that. Second, I think that on the government's behalf, I think what they're thinking is that this helps further legitimize the idea that Artsakh is a self-represented government, that they have their own elected officials and they have the capacity to speak for themselves. Now, I don't know if we're going to play this out. Do the Azeris accept what happens after that? But, as of this point, I think those are the two main targets as a response to the initial invitation, and two, for Artsakh to be at that table where these discussions are happening.
Okay. Yesterday, we also read that Artsakh farmers have been urged to work under Russian observation or presence in their fields because there have been a lot of Azeri shootings at farmers. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I think we've seen, rampant escalation in terms of those types of common shootings where Azeri troops will target agricultural areas, people that tend to be closer to the borderlines, people that are, in terms of their trade and stuff, dealing with agriculture, dealing with farming. So in the last, I would say, 2 months, we've seen a drastic escalation. Almost, if you guys pay attention, like every 2-3 days, there'll be a report coming out. Askeran shooting, Marduni shooting, Mardaget shooting, and this is a pattern. So the farmers working under Russian peacekeepers' presence isn't something that's completely a novel thing. It's not brand new, but it is something that has been expanded in light of everything that's been going on. So whereas before you may have had a couple of locations like that, I think today you see much more.
Yeah, it sounds like it's becoming a little more formal and maybe more of a standard operating procedure for farmers.
Yes, I think that may be the direction.
Okay, thank you for talking with us, Gev. Appreciate your time. Let's talk soon.
Glad to be on. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Good night, Gev. And please communicate to the people in Artsakh that despite our leadership, we're all with you.